He was outrageous. I mean, he was just a beautiful spirit, you know. I mean, he certainly didn't deserve that, you know. And I mean, once again, we're bringing, I guess, the older you get.
Some of the biggest names in guitar playing have reportedly had run-ins with Keith Richards, the legendary guitarist from the Rolling Stones. Eddie Van Halen, John Mayer, and Steve Vai are just a few of the guitar heroes who have allegedly felt the sting of Keith's sharp criticism over the years. The man who helped create some of rock's most famous riffs has never been shy about sharing his opinions on fellow guitarists, and those opinions are rarely kind. Keith Richards represents old-school rock and roll. He believes in raw emotion, simple but powerful playing, and connecting with audiences through feeling rather than flashy technique. This puts him at odds with many modern guitarists who focus on technical skill, complex playing styles, and showing off their abilities. The result has been a series of reported feuds and disagreements that highlight the ongoing debate in the guitar world between soul and skill, between keeping it simple and pushing boundaries. These alleged conflicts aren't just personal disagreements between musicians. They represent a deeper divide in rock music about what guitar playing should be. Should guitarists focus on moving people's emotions with simple, heartfelt playing, or should they push the limits of what's possible with the instrument through technical mastery? Keith has clearly chosen his side, and he's not afraid to criticize those who disagree with his approach. The Swedish virtuoso, Yngwie Malmsteen. One of the most reported feuds involves Swedish guitarist Yngwie Malmsteen, known for his incredibly fast and technically complex playing style. Malmsteen helped create what's called neoclassical metal, combining classical music influences with heavy metal guitar work. His playing is lightning fast and requires years of practice to master, but according to stories from the music industry, Keith Richards sees it as everything wrong with modern guitar playing. The conflict allegedly began in the mid-1980s when Keith saw Malmsteen performing on MTV. Industry sources claim that Keith turned to his bandmate Ronnie Wood and dismissed Malmsteen's playing as showing off rather than real music. Keith reportedly called it musical masturbation, suggesting it was all technique with no soul or emotional connection. The disagreement became more public when Keith supposedly gave an interview to Guitar Player magazine. In this interview, he reportedly criticized the entire neoclassical guitar movement, calling it a circus sideshow. Keith's philosophy seems to be that real guitar artistry comes from passion and emotion, not from endless practice sessions with metronomes and technical exercises. Malmsteen, who is known for having a fiery personality, allegedly didn't take these criticisms quietly. According to reports, he fired back in a Swedish interview, calling Keith an old blues dinosaur who couldn't play a proper musical scale to save his life. This exchange perfectly captures the divide between two completely different approaches to guitar playing. Keith represents the old school of rock guitar, where 3 simple chords played with feeling can be more powerful than the most complex technical display. He comes from the tradition of blues guitarists like Muddy Waters and B.B. King, who could make a single note sound incredibly emotional. Malmsteen represents the technical revolution in guitar playing, showing that the instrument can do things that earlier generations of guitarists never imagined possible. For Keith, there's no contest between these approaches. Industry insiders report that he once said during a recording session that he would take B.B. King playing one note with feeling over any technical display any day of the week. This attitude puts him directly at odds with the direction much of guitar playing has taken since the 1980s. The technical master, Steve Vai. Steve Vai is often called one of the most technically gifted guitarists in the world. He can play incredibly complex music and has pushed the boundaries of what's possible on the guitar. However, this technical mastery has reportedly put him in direct conflict with Keith Richards' philosophy of guitar playing. The alleged feud between Keith and Steve Vai supposedly began at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame ceremony in 1991. Both guitarists were performing that night, and during a jam session, Vai launched into one of his signature technical showcases. This included advanced techniques like tapping the strings with both hands and sweep picking, which creates very fast and complex-sounding passages. According to witnesses at the event, Keith watched Vai's performance with visible disgust. He later reportedly told a journalist that Vai played like he's performing open-heart surgery, not rock and roll. This comment reveals Keith's belief that guitar playing should be natural and emotional, not clinical and overly precise. The tension between these two guitarists became more public in 1993, when Keith gave an interview where he said that some guitarists can play 500 notes and say nothing, while others can play one note that makes you cry. While he didn't mention Vai by name, people in the music industry knew exactly who he was talking about, and Vai's representatives certainly noticed the criticism. Vai, who is known for being confident in his abilities, allegedly responded at a guitar clinic by saying that he could play more notes than Keith could count. This response shows the fundamental difference in how these two musicians view guitar playing. For Vai, technical ability and the capacity to play complex music is something to be proud of and to demonstrate. For Keith, it's missing the point entirely. This disagreement represents a deeper philosophical divide in the guitar community. Keith embodies the soul and emotion of rock and roll, where every note should carry weight and meaning. He believes that guitar playing is about communicating feelings and connecting with audiences on an emotional level. Vai represents the evolution of guitar playing, where the instrument becomes a tool for exploring the absolute limits of musical and technical expression. Keith's philosophy, as he reportedly told his guitar technician, is that he would rather play 5 notes with real meaning than 1,000 notes with no emotional content. For him, the purpose of guitar playing isn't to impress other guitarists with technical skill. Instead, it's about reaching regular people and moving them emotionally, even if that means playing simple but powerful riffs, rather than showcasing advanced techniques. The innovator, Eddie Van Halen. Perhaps one of the most surprising alleged feuds involves Eddie Van Halen, because these two guitarists should have had a lot in common. Both revolutionized guitar playing in their own ways and left lasting impacts on rock music. Eddie pioneered new techniques and sounds that influenced countless guitarists, while Keith helped create the foundation of rock guitar playing. However, their different approaches to the instrument reportedly led to significant tension. The alleged conflict began during the Rolling Stones' massive Steel Wheels tour in 1989, when Van Halen was the opening act. According to a former Rolling Stones roadie, there was tension backstage from the very beginning of the tour. Keith supposedly walked into Eddie's dressing room one day and found him practicing complex tapping patterns, which is a technique where both hands tap the strings against the guitar neck to create fast, intricate sounds. Keith allegedly made a dismissive comment about saving such practice for music stores rather than using it during a rock show. This reveals Keith's belief that concerts should be about delivering powerful, emotional performances rather than demonstrating technical abilities. The comment also shows his view that overly complex techniques belong in practice rooms or music stores, not on stage in front of audiences who want to be entertained and moved by the music. The situation got worse as Eddie's innovative two-hand tapping technique became increasingly popular during the 1980s, influencing a whole generation of young guitarists. In a famous interview with Rolling Stone magazine, Keith reportedly dismissed what he called the widdly-widdly movement, saying it had nothing to do with real rock and roll. This phrase became a way of describing guitar playing that focused on technical tricks and fast passages, rather than solid songwriting and emotional expression. Eddie Van Halen, who was generally known for being humble and respectful, was reportedly hurt by Keith's public criticism. According to sources close to Van Halen, he told a friend that Keith kept his playing simple because that's all he was capable of doing. This comment eventually made its way back to Keith Richards, which escalated the feud even further. Music industry insiders suggest that the real issue wasn't just musical differences, but also jealousy. During the 1980s, Eddie was dominating guitar magazine covers and inspiring a new generation of players, while Keith and the Rolling Stones were sometimes dismissed as dinosaurs from an earlier era of rock music. This generational shift in attention and influence may have contributed to Keith's negative feelings toward Eddie's style of playing. At a Guitar Summit meeting in 1992, Keith allegedly refused to be in the same room as Eddie, calling his style gymnastics, not music. This comment perfectly captures Keith's view that Eddie's innovative techniques were more like athletic displays than genuine musical expression. The comparison to gymnastics suggests that Keith saw Eddie's playing as requiring physical skill and precision, but lacking the emotional depth that Keith values in music. This feud represents a fundamental tension in rock history between tradition and innovation. Keith championed the raw power of blues-based rock, the foundation upon which rock and roll was built. Eddie opened the floodgates to new technical possibilities, showing that rock guitar could incorporate elements and techniques that had never been tried before. As Keith supposedly told his bandmates, he would take soul over technical solos any day of the week, regardless of how impressive those solos might be to other guitarists. The instrumental virtuoso, Joe Satriani. Joe Satriani represents something that Keith Richards apparently finds particularly annoying: the elevation of instrumental guitar music to an art form in itself. Satriani is known for creating complex, melodic instrumental pieces that showcase not just technical skill, but also compositional ability and musical creativity. However, this approach to guitar music reportedly puts him directly at odds with Keith's philosophy about what guitar playing should accomplish. The alleged drama between Keith and Satriani began at a VH1 awards ceremony in 1996. Satriani had just released an album called The Extremist and was being celebrated as guitar's next big innovator. According to industry insiders who were present, Keith overheard Satriani telling a reporter that rock music needed to evolve beyond the simple three-chord blues progressions that had dominated the genre's early decades. This comment was apparently a huge mistake from Keith's perspective. Later that same night, Keith reportedly confronted Satriani at the after-party, telling him that real guitar playing was about connecting with people emotionally, not jerking off on stage. This crude comment reveals Keith's belief that instrumental guitar showcases are self-indulgent rather than genuinely communicative or entertaining. The conflict escalated when Keith gave what became a famous interview to Guitarist magazine. In this interview, he reportedly called instrumental guitar music musical masturbation and said that if a musician can't communicate effectively in 3 minutes using 3 chords, then they're not a real musician, but rather a virtuoso wanker. This harsh language shows just how strongly Keith feels about the difference between showmanship and genuine musical communication. Satriani, who is generally known for being a gentleman and avoiding public conflicts, kept quiet in the media. However, he allegedly told his tour manager that Keith wouldn't recognize good guitar tone if it bit him on his wrinkled behind. When this comment leaked to the music press, it further inflamed the reported feud between these two very different approaches to guitar music. According to industry sources, Keith despises what Satriani represents in the guitar world. This includes the elevation of technical skill over emotional feeling, the celebration of instrumental showboating over solid songwriting, and the idea that complexity is inherently better than simplicity. Keith apparently believes that if music doesn't make people want to dance or sing along, then it's failed in its primary purpose of entertainment and emotional connection. Keith reportedly expressed his philosophy during a studio session by saying that he had never seen anyone dance to a Satriani guitar solo, and that this fact told him everything he needed to know about what makes real rock and roll music. This comment reveals Keith's belief that music should be accessible, moving, and physically engaging for regular audiences, not just impressive to other musicians or guitar enthusiasts. This feud cuts to the heart of fundamental questions about what guitar music should be and do. Should it be entertainment that moves people emotionally and physically, or should it be art that explores the full possibilities of the instrument? Should it be simple and direct, or complex and challenging? Keith chose his side of this debate long ago and has apparently never wavered from his position. The modern rock icon, Slash, one of the more surprising alleged feuds involves Slash from Guns N' Roses, because both Keith and Slash represent similar schools of rock and roll guitar playing. Both are known for their blues-based approach, their focus on powerful riffs, and their commitment to rock and roll attitude. However, even these similarities weren't enough to prevent reported tension between these two guitar legends. The alleged conflict began during the Rolling Stones' Steel Wheels tour in 1989, when Guns N' Roses was serving as the opening act. According to tour insiders, Keith noticed that Slash's guitar technician was setting up multiple amplifier rigs and numerous effects pedals before each show. Keith supposedly approached the setup area and made a sarcastic comment about whether they were preparing for a concert or conducting a bloody science experiment. This comment reveals Keith's preference for simple, direct guitar setups over the complex equipment arrangements that became common in rock music during the 1980s and beyond. Keith apparently believes that good guitar tone should come from the natural interaction between a guitar, an amplifier, and the player's hands, rather than from electronic seats, and processing. The real drama reportedly started when Keith gave an interview to Spin magazine in 1992, calling Slash a competent guitarist who plays too much. He allegedly went further, saying that effects pedals are just a crutch for guitarists who can't make their instruments sing naturally without electronic assistance. This criticism strikes at the heart of modern rock guitar playing, which often relies heavily on various effects to create distinctive sounds. Slash, who is generally known for keeping a cool demeanor and avoiding public conflicts, was reportedly angry about Keith's comments. According to backstage sources at a music festival in 1993, Slash told his bandmates that Keith wouldn't recognize good guitar tone even if Mick Jagger wrote a song about it. This clever insult plays on Keith's relationship with his famous bandmate while questioning his ability to judge guitar sounds. When this comment got back to Keith, he supposedly responded by calling Slash yesterday's news with today's haircut. This personal attack on Slash's distinctive appearance shows that the feud had moved beyond musical differences into personal territory. The comment also reveals Keith's possible resentment of younger guitarists who were gaining attention and popularity, while the Rolling Stones were sometimes dismissed as aging rock stars. Industry sources suggest that the feud runs deeper than just disagreements about effects pedals and guitar tone. Keith apparently felt threatened by Slash becoming the new face of rock guitar during the late 1980s and early 1990s. Slash was selling guitars for Gibson, filling stadiums with Guns N' Roses, and inspiring a new generation of rock guitarists, while the Rolling Stones were sometimes labeled as dinosaurs from an earlier era. At a Guitar Summit meeting in 1994, both guitarists were scheduled to appear and possibly perform together. However, Keith allegedly refused to participate, telling the organizers that he wouldn't share a stage with someone whose signature guitar tone came from a Marshall amplifier combined with 15 bloody effects pedals. This refusal shows Keith's deep commitment to his philosophy about pure, unprocessed guitar sound versus modern rock's embrace of effects and production techniques. This feud reveals Keith's fundamental belief in what he considers authentic rock and roll guitar playing. His equation is simple. A Gibson guitar plus a Marshall amplifier equals rock and roll, while everything else is just unnecessary noise and complication. This purist attitude puts him at odds with the evolution of rock guitar, which has embraced technology and effects as legitimate tools for musical expression. The modern blues master, John Mayer. The most explosive and well-publicized alleged feud involves John Mayer, and this conflict represents perhaps the biggest generational divide in rock guitar history. Mayer emerged in the early 2000s as a skilled guitarist who could play both pop music and serious blues, but his approach to the instrument and his generation's relationship with music technology reportedly made him a perfect target for Keith Richards' criticism. The reported drama began in 2004 when John Mayer, fresh from winning Grammy Awards for his pop music, told MTV that he wanted to be the next Keith Richards. This ambitious statement was apparently a huge mistake. According to industry sources, Keith saw the interview and reportedly told his manager that Mayer was the next me, only if he had learned guitar from YouTube tutorials rather than through real musical experience. This comment reveals Keith's disdain for the modern approach to learning guitar, which often involves online videos, computer programs, and digital resources, rather than learning from other musicians in person or dev. Eloping skills through years of live. Keith reportedly expressed his philosophy in a heated backstage argument, saying that Mayer had access to every guitar pedal, amplifier, and effect ever created, but still couldn't make a guitar weep like Muddy Waters did with one beat-up Telecaster guitar. This comment perfectly captures Keith's belief that emotional expression and authentic feeling are more important than technical resources or modern equipment. The deeper meaning. These alleged feuds reveal something important about the evolution of rock guitar and the tensions between different generations of musicians. Keith Richards represents the founding generation of rock and roll, the musicians who created the genre from blues, country, and early rhythm and blues influences. His approach to guitar is rooted in simplicity, emotional directness, and the belief that music should be accessible and moving to regular audiences. The guitarists he reportedly criticizes represent different aspects of how rock guitar has evolved since the 1970s. Some focus on technical mastery and pushing the boundaries of what's possible on the instrument. Others embrace modern technology and production techniques to create new sounds. Still others approach blues and rock from an academic or studied perspective, rather than learning it through direct cultural transmission. Keith's alleged criticism of these approaches isn't just about personal preference or musical snobbery. It reflects a fundamental disagreement about what music should do and how it should connect with audiences. Keith believes that the best music comes from raw emotion, cultural authenticity, and direct communication between performer and audience. He apparently sees modern approaches as getting in the way of this direct connection. Whether these specific feuds and quotes are entirely accurate or partly mythologized, they represent real tensions in the music world. The debate between technical skill and emotional expression, between innovation and tradition, between complexity and simplicity, continues to shape how musicians approach their craft and how audiences understand and appreciate music. Keith Richards' reported attitudes toward his fellow guitarists reveal his unwavering commitment to his musical philosophy, even when that philosophy puts him at odds with the evolution of his chosen instrument and genre. Whether you see him as keeping rock and roll honest or as being stuck in the past probably depends on your own beliefs about what music should accomplish and how it should connect with people's lives. Performance. Keith represents a generation that learned music through direct human interaction and real-world experience, while Mayer represents a generation that had access to digital learning tools and resources. The conflict exploded in 2006 when Keith gave what became a legendary interview to Rolling Stone magazine. In this interview, he reportedly called Mayer a bedroom guitar player who wouldn't last 5 minutes on a real stage with a live audience. Keith allegedly added that modern guitarists spend more time with their computers than with their actual guitars, and that this approach isn't rock and roll but rather like creating a PowerPoint presentation. This brutal assessment attacks not just Mayer's playing ability, but also his entire generation's relationship with music and technology. Keith's comment about bedroom guitar players suggests that he sees modern guitarists as isolated individuals who practice alone with digital tools rather than developing their skills through interaction with other musicians and live audiences. Mayer was clearly stung by these harsh criticisms. In his own interview response, he said that he had more respect for Keith than Keith apparently had for him. However, industry insiders reported that Mayer was deeply hurt by the public attack from someone he had admired. His representatives allegedly told the press that Keith was simply jealous of someone who could actually play proper scales, striking back at Keith's relatively simple approach to guitar playing. The feud reached peak drama at a music festival in 2009, where both guitarists were scheduled to perform. Keith reportedly demanded that Mayer's monitor sound system be turned down, claiming that his guitar tone was offensive to real musicians. This demand shows Keith's belief that Mayer's approach to guitar sound was not just different, but actually harmful to authentic musical expression. Mayer allegedly responded to this insult in a brilliantly creative way. He reportedly played Keith's signature song, Satisfaction, but performed the famous riff in the technical style of Steve Vai, complete with two-handed tapping techniques. This performance was apparently intended as a deliberate middle finger to Keith Richards, showing that Mayer could play Keith's own music in a more technically sophisticated way than Keith himself could manage. According to industry insiders, Keith despises everything that John Mayer represents in the modern music world. This includes the Instagram generation of guitarists who document their playing online, the focus on technical ability over emotional expression, and what Keith sees as the commercialization and sanitization of blues music. Keith apparently believes that Mayer represents a watered-down commercial version of the blues tradition that Keith learned from original masters like Muddy Waters,